Hey guys, welcome back to the YouTube channel for the Renaissance English History Podcast. My name is Heather, and I've been podcasting on Tudor England since 2009, the original Tudor History Podcast. So it's no secret on this channel that I am absolutely in love with autumn, and so I decided to do an episode. Last week I did the witches in Tudor England. I decided to do an episode this week on how the Tudors would have gotten ready for autumn. So as you can see, I am totally ready for autumn. I've got the hat on, which actually I don't think this is going to stay on for this whole episode because it's bothering me. But anyway, got the hat. I've got the plaid on. I've got the candle back here, and I've got my coffee in my autumnal mug. So I am clearly very ready. And it is October, and so here we are. So we are going to talk about how the Tudors got ready for autumn. You ready? I'm ready. And by the way, if you're not already subscribed to my channel, you should totally subscribe so you never miss out on content no matter what the season. So let's get right into it. As we know, the rhythm of life for Tudor people was deeply tied to the seasons, and autumn was perhaps the busiest time of all. While today, some of the things we might be doing is taking out our cozy blankets and our cozy jammies and maybe putting up weather stripping, things like that, the Tudors had far more pressing tasks. Winter was always looming, and whether you were a nobleman or a yeoman farmer, your entire livelihood, if you were going to make it through the winter, depended on how well you could prepare. For farmers, the autumn months were a race against time. You weren't just enjoying the bounty of the harvest, you were also making sure that you had enough food stored to last through the winter. The autumn air would be filled with the smell of fresh cut wheat and barley, which needed to be gathered, threshed, and stored carefully to avoid rodents, rats, and pests, and also rotting throughout the season as well. One interesting technique that farmers used to protect their crops was to spread prickly gorse branches on the barn floor. This helped to keep the rodents out while allowing some airflow to prevent the rot. Every grain of barley was essential, not just for making bread, but also for brewing ale, which of course was also very important for the Tudor diet. In Tudor England, salt was a game changer. In a world without refrigeration, it was essential for preserving meat throughout the winter. In November, right around Martinmas on November 11th, farmers would be slaughtering their livestock since they couldn't afford to feed the animals through the cold winter months. So the freshly butchered meat was packed in salt to draw out the moisture and prevent spoiling. So here's a fun fact about how valuable salt was. I actually did a whole episode on salt in Tudor England a couple of years ago. It's a lot of fun to nerd out on. I'll put a link somewhere. But the whole thing is salt was incredibly valuable. So valuable that in the Roman period, the soldiers were actually paid in part with salt. Now, the Spanish word for salt, I know it comes from Latin, is called sal, right? Now, the soldiers were paid in salt. I love this. This is the stuff that just tickles my funny bone so much. So the soldiers were paid in salt, and the amount that they received, their allotted amount, was called their salarium, which is where we get the term salary from. See? So this stuff sticks with us. We use these words and they have they're rooted in ancient times. And I just love that. So salary, salt. So you can impress your friends the next time you're out at dinner, or, if you're a student, you want to impress your teachers, you can totally use that. And that'll impress everybody, or they'll think you're a giant nerd. Either way, it'll be fun. Okay. So where was I? Salt. Salt wasn't just used for meat. It was also used in all sorts of preservation techniques, from fruit to herbs. So people were very busy salting things right now. Now, making salt was actually a really specialized job, and most people didn't have the ability to make their own from a brine, so they would buy it from wallers, women who worked in salt-making yards. They would boil brine in really large flat pans, and then they would scrape off the crystals that would form as the water evaporated. The cleanest salt was used for the finer foods like cheese, while the dirtier salt was used for everyday cooking and preserving. So autumn wasn't just about hard work, though. It was also a time for celebration. After the crops were safely stored away, Tudor communities came together to celebrate the harvest. It was a time to give thanks for the bounty of the season. Michaelmas, which is celebrated on September 29th, marked the end of the farming year. It was a major, major holiday in the Tudor calendar. The celebrations were lively. They were filled with games and feasts and rituals. One of the more playful traditions was a game called Barley Race, where the men would try to sneak barley into the barn, while the women stood guard with jugs of water, and the men would try to sneak the barley into the barn without getting wet. So, that's fun. It wasn't all fun and games, though. Michaelmas also marked the day when rents were due and new servants were hired for the year ahead. So while there was plenty of joy, there was also a sense of responsibility and preparation for the future. As the crops were being stored, Tudor housewives were busy gathering herbs from their gardens. Herbs like hyssop, which were used to treat winter ailments like coughs and asthma and earaches, were dried and stored for use during the cold months. Hyssop was part of the mint family, and it's actually still used today for its soothing properties for sore throats and coughs. Other herbs and fruits and vegetables would be preserved in syrups or brines, and these preparations helped to ensure that even in the middle of winter, the Tudor families would have access to some sort of nutrition, whether for healing or just simply adding flavor to the otherwise very limited diet that they would have in the middle of February. The Tudors were also big on their herbal remedies, of course. Some of these practices are still around today. Herbalists now credit hyssop with reducing inflammation and boosting overall health. So that's fun. As autumn deepened, the last of the harvest was brought in, including fruits like apples and pears. These fruits were often stored in jars with syrups to last through the winter. Vegetables like cabbages and root crops were also preserved for stews and soups that would warm you up throughout the bitter cold that lied ahead. Lies ahead? Was lying ahead? Yeah, maybe that. Anyway, interestingly, even geese played a part in the Tudor autumn preparations. After the fields were cleared of the crops, geese were released to eat up any leftover grains, fattening up for the feasts later in the season. By the time November rolled around, the first real signs of winter would start to appear. The fields were empty, the animals were being butchered or were prepared for being butchered, and the families would gather around their hearths ready to face the winter, hopefully with plenty of resources that they had gathered during the autumn. I think about this like if you didn't have a good harvest and you were looking at your attic, like it's such a real kind of thing, right? If you had things stored like in, say, a storage area up higher above the eaves or something, and you can see it filling up as autumn goes on. Man, and if it got to be like November 15th, then everything was harvested and your stockpile was only like half of what you thought it should be. That would be a rough feeling. That would be a really rough feeling. Yikes. Not for me, thank you. Not for me. But conversely, if you had had a good year and you had a lot of food and a lot of meat and barley and everything stored, you might be looking at that and feeling pretty good about yourself. Either way, that is a little bit about how the Tudors were preparing for winter, what they would have been doing at this time of year in the autumn months. From salting meat, gathering herbs, to celebrating the harvest, every task was essential for their survival during the long, cold winter. Today, we might take for granted our cozy homes and our easy access to food, but for the Tudors, autumn was a time of preparation, of community, of getting ready for this winter that was coming, and for gratitude for the harvest that you had. So if you have made it this far and you made it through the video and you enjoyed it, I sure would appreciate a press of that like button. It helps to get the video to more people. And I hope I earned your subscription to my channel where I put out videos like this on the regular. I don't always wear a hat like this though. Pink. I don't know. I don't know that it's going to last. It's as soon as I get done taping this, it's going to come off. Anyway, Thank you so much for watching. Remember, you are deeply loved. I'm so glad I share the planet with you. And I will be back again very soon. Don't forget to drink your water. Super important. All right, friend. Bye-bye.